Hi, everyone. It's Reverend Laurie Gist with Unity of Ocala, and we are actually sending out this Zoom recording for our Sunday services instead of our small sacred gatherings. Many of you know that the weather is supposed to be really awful tomorrow, and we don't want any of you out on the road during these storms. Last week, when it stormed so bad, nobody actually showed up for the small gatherings except our sound team and our ushers. So we don't want them out in this weather either. So we are so blessed to have the capability to record our messages remotely, in this case from my home, and get them to you on Sunday morning. And you can relax, stay home, drink your coffee, and enjoy your time at home, safe and dry. So for Sunday, April 18th, here we are in the month of divine wisdom. And you know, some of you may remember years ago, some of you who have been in the psychological and psychoanalysis areas and careers, you may remember in the 60s or 70s, there was this thing called the Cinderella complex, the Cinderella Syndrome going around in these circles. And it was based kind of loosely on a book that was written called The Cinderella Complex. And it was about this archetypical feminine aspect brought on by years of patriarchal societies run by men, which most in our civilization, at least that modern times have evolved from, were run by. And there is this notion in such circles that in so many women, there is this subconscious fear of independence, that without this handsome prince on a white horse to rescue and support us, we are inadequate. It lies below the surface. We don't even know it's there, but it seemed prevalent in many cases that were studied. And so I was really intrigued by that. And I wanted to go a little deeper and see, did this just affect women? And I came to the conclusion that absolutely not. Not in my experience, in my counseling, in my circles. I saw this almost perverse obsession with happily ever after in everybody. And seemingly the more modern the society, the more prevalent this happily ever after. The Bible may speak of it as covetousness, where there's never quite enough. If I don't have that knight in shining armor, that prince charming, that sleeping beauty, that two-story home, two-car garage, if I'm not keeping up, something must be inadequate in me. Something must be wrong. And this causes so much suffering and so much pain. All of the great religions of the world have these mystical paths to them that explore such topics of life in a very deep and spiritual way. They tend to go off script of the literal interpretations of all their Bibles and mystical teachings and peel away the layers to see what's really going on spiritually in the human psyche and in the evolution of the spirit. And I always look to these mystics to, number one, interpret the readings of the mainstream religions from which they rose, but also to see how so much more alike we are than different. For example, last week I spoke a little bit about the Tao and the way of the Buddhist, that way of detachment, that non-attachment to the things of the world, being in the world but not of the world. And that train of thought, that idea that as we lean less on attachments of the things of the earth, we are freer then to open to the higher realms of consciousness. And that is consistent with all the religions across the board, especially in the mystical realms. Christian mystics, especially Catholic Christian mystics, especially the saints. It was the journey of the saints that intrigued me to look deeper at how this dissatisfaction with where we are in life, the disappointments, the upsets, the disasters, the pain, the aches, can lead to a higher level of living and wisdom. Let me give you an example. All the saints I've studied, many, they all have experienced some level of extreme discontent, whether it be illness, whether it be in times of extreme sickness or war or famine or disaster or wiping out of entire civilizations. There was something going on during their journey to the understanding of God that helped them get there. And I've studied this for decades, and I've been given a lot of opportunities with challenges of my own, and despair and frustration and deep disappointments. And I read the writings and the teachings of those who seem to touch a space of grace through this. And initially I thought, well, it must be that the pain, the agony are the way to the spiritual enlightenment, and we must experience that in order to get there. I thought, I don't think that's God's way or God's love. And looking deeper, I learned that through those experiences, you don't necessarily find God, but you open up a pathway that may not have been there, because the yearning in itself for something beyond yourself opens a pathway. The mystics call it the path of yearning. We think this yearning is that Cinderella complex, but we will never be satisfied. The ego mind can never be satisfied. It will always want more money, because we will learn how to spend everything we have. The ego mind will always want more space, more things, more and more, because without the understanding that it is God we are searching for, you can never fill that gap. And sometimes, my experience, through disaster and disappointment, our yearning heart breaks and opens to a path where we find God. It's an extraordinary blessing. You know, I read about a man who had a very dear friend that was a multi-millionaire. This was back when $1 million would be $1 billion today. So this was a multi-billionaire dollar. They were very, very good friends. And this man was not wealthy. He lived in a very modest home, a very modest family, very humble things, very few things. He was incredibly happy. And someone asked him, you know, you've got these friends that have so much wealth and so much, aren't you jealous? Aren't you upset of the life they are living? And he said, oh my goodness, no. And they said, well, what's the difference? I mean, why are you so happy? And he just looked at them and said, well, I know I have enough. That just shifted so much in me. And I looked around at my life so full. I have enough. I have enough love. I have enough joy. I have enough friends. I have enough money to get through. I have enough food. I have enough clothing. More than enough. That opens a way to such bliss. Some of these writers, simple abundance, opens the way to this path of yearning that allows us to somehow touch on something because we are detached to any more to fill our ego. I want to read something for you that is so deep for me, so profound. It was written by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard was born in the year 1010. So you can imagine how life was. And he was born into a very austere family, a very wealthy family, aristocracy. Actually, he was born into royalty. And he was incredibly dissatisfied with life. And he started not ever having enough and this desire to have more. And he started a search for God. And he helped found a little community that was really struggling. And he took great joy after a while in the yearning that leads to a higher understanding of God and the nothingness of the world. And he wrote some provocative and extraordinary sermons. And this one is so beautiful. It's many pages long, and it is translated as closely as it can get to the original script in his original language. I'm just going to read you a few paragraphs of this because this really struck me about how he had finally had enough of his own selfishness and his own emptiness that could never be filled, and went into this secluded realm of a brotherly community that just spent time releasing, detaching, letting go, and spending much time in prayer and chanting and meditation, especially with nature, which is where God opened that path of yearning in him to a new experience. And that happens to so many of these saints, this experience. St. John of the Cross had this desperate dark night of the soul. St. Teresa of Avila had this entry into these seven castles of consciousness that peeled away the layers of the earthly garbage that we become attached to. Let me just read you. He writes this: I want to tell you of my own experience as I promised. I have never been conscious of the moment of his coming. I perceived his presence. I remembered it afterwards that he had been with me. Sometimes I had a presentiment that he would come, but I was never conscious of his coming or his going, and where he comes from when he visits my soul, and where he goes, and by what means he enters and goes out. You do not know where he comes from and where he goes. There is nothing strange in this, for of him was it said, your footsteps will not be known. He is not one of the things which exists outside of us. Yet he does not come from within me, for he is pure good. And I know there is some not good in me. I have ascended to the highest in me, and look, the word is towering above that. In my curiosity, I have descended to explore my lowest depths, the longing. Yet I found him even deeper than my lowest depths. If I looked outside myself, I saw him stretching far beyond the furthest I could see or reach. And if I looked within, he was yet further within. Then I knew the truth of what I had read. In him we live and move and have our being, and blessed is the man in whom he has his being, who lives for him and is moved by him. I have marveled at the depth of his wisdom when my secret faults have been revealed and made visible. Oh, the yearning. At the very slightest amendment of my way of thinking, I have experienced that goodness and mercy in the renewal and the remaking of the spirit of my mind. For it is natural for a person to desire what he considers better than what he already has. No matter how many such things one has, he is always lusting after what he has not, never at peace. In his greediness, he counts all that he has clutched as nothing in comparison with what is beyond his grasp, and loses all pleasure. No man can ever hope to own all things. If you wish to attain the consummation of all desire so that nothing unfulfilled will be left, why weary yourself with fruitless efforts only to die long before the goal is reached? The heightened ones wander in a circle, wanting to try all things one by one. Life is too short, strength too feeble, and competitors too many for that. One could never reach the end. Though he were to weary himself with the long effort and fruitless toil, the soul can no more be satisfied by earthly treasures than the hunger of the body can be satisfied by air. But we are no less foolish to imagine that the soul can be satisfied with worldly things. It is only as he enters from where which he comes. That is just so deep and so profound. I have thought on this sermon for many years, and I bring it to mind whenever we are collectively feeling this sadness, this despair, this collective rage. I focus on these thoughts about the depth of that God in him, the height and reach of that God, that these saints and these mystics of all the religions have touched on and shared. And so let us, as we journey through this month of wisdom, open to the path of yearning. And when we experience these feelings of emptiness, fear, loneliness, despair, frustration, let us open and feel the yearning and open the way to the path and sit in it and be prepared to feel that that entry is always available. I'm going to leave our time today on this Sunday with the daily word. We're going to miss that during our service today, among other things. But we are all together in spirit always. And I'm thinking of every one of you right now, wishing I could see your beautiful faces, even though they're masked. Today's message is guidance. I am grateful for the gift of spiritual intuition. When I need to make a decision or decide my next steps, my first thought might be to look for directions outside of myself. Turn on the news. Today I make a new choice. I become quiet and receptive and connect with my still, small voice. Fresh ideas and specific solutions arise in my mind as I place my oneness with God at the forefront of my mind. If I have a question, I write it down and go into meditation and trust my impressions. I invest some time in spiritual search using my intuition, aligned with that part of me that knows answers and inspiration are already at hand. I tap into an abundant storehouse of knowledge and discover more about who I really am and who I am called to be along this journey of a lifetime. And in Exodus 18:19, now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. What a beautiful message for this beautiful weekend. I will see you Wednesday, and I will certainly see you next Sunday. The light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is, and all is well. I love you. God loves you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.